Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Riches. I am the current team manager in the Child Advice and Duty Service with a responsibility for missing children and child exploitation. The team that I manage currently screen children for risk of child exploitation and serious youth violence, and we review all missing children episodes for children placed and living in Norfolk. So today's webinar, the learning outcomes, I'm hoping that following this hour session, I'm going to be able to give you an understanding of the role of the missing practitioners within children's services, to understand the missing procedures and processes for return home interviews when a child is found, and to understand your role as a school or college in the processes. And Claire is going to finish the webinar by going through the education screening information form. So I've just highlighted there different missing children definitions. So I think it's really important that sometimes we are aware of where a child may be. However, we know that it's beyond their curfew time, or we know that this is of concern. So these are the police definitions for missing from care, absent, and away from placement without authorisation. So all the missing episodes that come through to me in CADS on a daily basis are defined as those under in the yellow box there. So any young person where whereabouts can't be established and where the circumstances are out of character, or the context suggests the person may be subject of crime or at risk of harm to themselves or another. So for me, one of the biggest indicators that I'm seeing for child exploitation is missing episodes, and which coincides with attendance from school or college as well being poor. But currently, since the COVID lockdown, we did see a decline in missing episodes. This did peak again once the restrictions lifted. But in the current climate, what we are seeing is a reluctance of families and parents reporting young people missing, as I feel that some of them are fearful of the COVID fines that are being issued at the moment. So by reporting them, the parents then feel they could be liable for a fine for allowing their young person to go out. So I am concerned that there is a number of young people that aren't being reported missing at the moment, and that might be why we're seeing a significant decline. Missing from care is exactly the same as the missing, so it's just that the place that they're expected to be, they're not there, and their whereabouts is unknown, not known. Absent, the police will define that as absent as if you are clear where that young person is, but it's not where they're supposed to be. So in terms of absent from school without authorisation during the school day, so in terms of truancy, I've just put the police information around that on there, because that differs slightly to a missing episode. So I think previously missing episodes have there has been reported missing episodes for young people where they're not present within education settings, and it's just this is just to really remind you of the guidance around that. So when a child goes missing during the school day, there should be clear procedures within the school, and the staff are aware of what those look like in terms of where young people should be. Ensure the registers are always up to date, and that each child's is sometimes a child might register in the morning and then they might leave. So it's just being clear that attendance is regularly recorded. If an absent child is reported to police, they will be treated as a missing person, as it says there, but there needs to be reasonable efforts made. Another piece of work that we're doing alongside running these kind of awareness sessions is we're looking at implementing something called the Philomena Protocol with our looked after children in our residential settings, which puts some owners on the residential settings undertaking some inquiries around where a young person might be. Where this fits in with yourselves as schools and colleges is that you will be able to provide vital information to those residential settings about the friendship groups of these young people, places you may be aware of that they tend to go to after education ends at the day. It might be a park, it might be anywhere that has come on your radar that you know that this young person goes to, or people that they associate with. And once that information will get fed back to the police, and they'll keep that as a kind of running record, which will be regularly updated, so that as soon as a child's reported missing, we've got a really clear idea of locations and associates that they may be with. So once the absence is discovered, as it says there, the parents' carers need to be contacted immediately, and the nature of the absence should be discussed. If there are risks involved, such as worries about exploitation or who they might be with, that needs to be fed back to the police. As it says there, even where there is no identified risk, if the child is still not at school by the end of the day and you've been able to inform their parents or carers, they should be reported missing. So once reasonable inquiries have been made with where that child may be, then that needs to be reported. For children not arriving at the beginning of the school day, it says follow your non-school attendance procedures, ensure there's specific processes in place for children who fall into the high risk and vulnerable category. So concerns around exploitation, hopefully as a school you'd be aware of what risk level they sit at and who their associates might be. There's a checklist that hopefully that you've all been aware of, and it's just really reminding you guys to keep this up to date. So in terms of if a child is subject to a child protection plan or a child in need plan, inform the social worker. I think it's also worth as a school or education setting adding to that the child's risk of exploitation. So just so you've got an awareness of what that is. There will be for those children screened at a medium or high risk, they will have an allocated MACE officer from the police. So it may be that they can be updated as well, because they can action any kind of welfare check if that was deemed necessary, that reasonable attempts were made to try and locate a child and they were unsuccessful. It would be good for that to be communicated. I'm just going to go through the statutory guidance on children that run away and missing from home or care. This hasn't been updated since 2014, so we are expecting at some point this to be reviewed, but currently these are the key points really, that every child must be offered an independent return home interview, so someone independent from their day-to-day care. They provide an opportunity for us to talk to that young person about what might prevent them from going missing again, who we need to be aware of, and any risks that they might be exposed to. We have 72 hours from the point that young person is found to meet with them and undertake the return home interview. It says there, following the return home interview, Children's Services, Police and Voluntary Services will work together to build up a comprehensive picture of why the child went missing. We want to understand what happened during the missing episode, who they were with is really important. We also look at where they're found now. So we're doing a lot of work in terms of that contextual safeguarding. So we have access to a dashboard that gives me data around how many young people are going missing on a daily basis, weekly basis, where they're being found, so we can look at any patterns or trends, who they're being found with, the length of time they've been missing, so that we can do some work with the police around particular addresses or areas of concern. And we've also got the support of the new targeted youth support service, so we can say to them, actually we've got a concern that our young people that we're aware of that have been engaged with these young people. As it says there, they provide an opportunity to inform case planning, wider strategic planning, and for professionals to take into account children's views. So by them being completely independent, some young people, what we know is if their issue is around their placement and they're not happy about where they're placed, they might continue to go missing. Therefore, they're not going to necessarily want to talk to their social worker about that, as they're aware their social worker has put them in that placement. So it's really important they've got someone independent to hear their views. What we also do for our return home interviews, for any child on a looked after child plan or a child protection plan, the independent chair and the independent reviewing officer will see every return home interview and ensure that that is followed up within the planning for that young person. It says there, where children refuse to engage, parents and carers should be offered the opportunity to provide any relevant information or intelligence. So this is part of the work that we're doing in terms of when a young person doesn't want to talk to us, we'll talk to as many professionals, parents, that are involved with that young person as we can. So that's why the information you provide is really important, especially when a young person isn't going to want to engage with that process. The information that you provide is going to be really vital to future safeguarding. So we'll always ask the parents around, how did that young person present when they returned home? What led up to the missing episode? And we'll try to see what information we can gather to build a picture of what happened. It says there, local authorities proactively consider investigating further to identify early any safeguarding concerns or whether the child and their family need support. So every time a young person goes missing, I get a list sent to me every day. I look across our Liquid Logic system to see if we're aware of that young person. Those that are aware, we inform all social workers, family support workers. For those that are not open to us, we consider the safeguarding that is required and we action it from the point that they have been gone missing. So we're always looking at whether there's something we can do prior to going out for a return home interview, or whether we can gather the information at the return home interview point and see if there's any support we can offer following that. So this bit about what the return home interview is, so we use it as an informal discussion which will aid professionals in their understanding of what's happening to a young person. It's based on relationship-based practice, so all of the missing practitioners that I will have will be independent to that young person. However, they may build that relationship with a young person who has gone missing several times, and therefore it's most appropriate for them to continue to see them for their return home interview. The return home interview is always offered to the young person around choice of whether they would like someone independent, or is there someone particular that they want to speak to. So it may be that they say, actually, I do want to speak to my teacher, teaching assistant, somebody identified within the education. And what I would expect is then a missing practitioner would make contact with yourselves to gather that information and record that within the return home interview. As it says there, return home interview informs discussions about action to be taken. So we'll always come up with an action plan following any missing episode, where we'll put clear steps that the family, the young person, carers need to take around what we can do to prevent. So and sometimes what we know is we might be aware that we might not be able to necessarily prevent that young person from leaving again, but we can put in as much safety as we can to try and prevent that. This can include disruption work with the police around certain individuals that a young person might be running to that we know may be exploiting that young person. We can look at various methods of disruption. So it says there, the information resulting from the RHI should be triangulated with a range of resources. So we'll look at whether we need to make an update to our social care assessments, we need to review the plan. But as it says there, it talks about professional curiosity. So what we always want to do is try and remain curious to find out exactly what's happened to that young person, especially in the areas of child exploitation. What we know is that when a young person returns, they will have seen a police officer to complete a safe and well check. And sometimes they can feel like they've already been interrogated by the police. So we have to make sure our return home interview is a different offer to what the police have given to that young person. The police very much will just ensure they've seen the child, they've made sure they're safe. If the child wants to report any issue to the police, they can. But our meeting with that young person is purely led by the young person's wants. We look at intelligence, as it says there. So anything that a young person tells us about where they're going, who they've associated with, that we feel is relevant, we will forward to the police within the MASH. And they will action anything from that. So a lot of the time, a young person might tell us something about something they have witnessed, or another young person that they've been associating with, and we will feed that in for an intelligence report, which will give us a picture of what's going on in the community. So the return home interview, in terms of what it can achieve, as it said there, we can help understand the reasons why the young person has gone missing. So more recently, I will say, since the COVID lockdown, we have had young people having longer missing episodes. So we're talking over the period of days and weeks I've had. And that can be due to that involvement in county lines. So we're having young people found out of county. So it's really important to try and engage with them to understand what's happened. As again, it talks about intelligence and then how we can use that to try and reduce risk. The idea of the return home interview is really to help that child feel safe and understand where they can go if they require help in the future. So we look at what the build up to going missing might look like for them, and what strategies we can help them put in place to prevent that. As it says there, it includes parents, so we want to work alongside parents to try and put in a plan that will keep that young person safe. So we'll look at what things we can do in terms of contact for that young person, who they can go to should they find themselves in a vulnerable situation. And it will help inform us of any key patterns and trends and analysis. So as I said to you, we're kind of using our dashboard at the moment that looks at exploitation and missing episodes to identify particular areas we need to target. It also tells us which school or education setting young people attend, so we can look at a particular education setting which we know has had significantly more missing episodes than another, to look at where we can support with that. Talks here about what we ask and consider in an RHI. So we'll look at the period of time a child is missing, and is this over 24 hours? Any child that's missing over 24 hours, we would consider a strategy discussion, as this is a significant period of time. We'll always make relevant inquiries with parents, carers, to see if there's been any contact, and we'll discuss that with the police. But generally, I would say expect to be part of a strategy discussion for any young person missing over 24 hours. We'll look at when the child was missing. Was it during school hours, or was it in a holiday period or a weekend? And then we'll kind of communicate that with you to see what we know about their attendance. We'll look at who reported the child missing. Sometimes what we find is it may not be the parent or carer, it might be another family, friend, and we'll try and understand what that's about. But we'll always speak to them around what they knew at the time they went missing. So what led up to the missing episode? Was there any change? Has there been any contact or any social media use? So we've had instances where we've been able to locate a young person through their social medias. They've posted where they might be. As it says there, we will look at when they return, where it was, who they were found with, what they presented like, how they got home, and whether they were found out of county. So we work closely with other local authorities who inform us of any young people that might be found in their area. And equally, I have a number of young people that get found in Norfolk from other areas. So I've been doing some work particularly with London boroughs around this. So those young people, we make sure there's a clear plan in terms of who's going to come and see them for their return home interview. We'll review, so this is the information that the questions that the police will ask that young person. So they have 6 questions that they have to ask every young person when they're found. We'll review that information. Sometimes that information we get quite a lot of information back from the police, but sometimes it's really limited, so we have to kind of review those questions. As you can see, they follow a very set pattern of questioning, whereas our return home interviews tend to be more, as I said, relationship based and conversation based. So it's very much led by what the young person wants to tell us. We'll explore the reasons the child has gone missing, their views on what we can do to support them to prevent them going missing. So we'll always ask them what they think needs to be in place to prevent them going missing again. And as someone independent, we can then feed that back to the social work family support team or parents carers to come up with a plan. We explore exactly the same questions with the parents as we do with young people to try and get an understanding of what they think could be helpful to them to prevent the young person going missing. As it says, professionals always consulted, including the school, your allocated workers. So anybody involved in that child's network, we try and include within that return home interview to get their views on what they knew about the missing episode. We'll explore whether the child was hurt or harmed during the missing episode, and were they a victim of crime or did they offend whilst missing. So if we're aware that there was a incident where they were hurt or harmed or a victim, again we'll review that, see if there's a requirement for a strategy discussion to share information with the police and health. It may be that they want to disclose something to us, so we'll always follow that up. What we often find is the young people that are at risk of exploitation, they might come back and tell us about a violent incident or an incident where they may have been sexually assaulted that we then have to look at ongoing safeguarding for. We review their risk of exploitation. So for those young people that are at risk, following the return home interview or we suspect are at risk, we'll review that. And if a screening, a child exploitation screening needs to be undertaken, we can do that at that point. So because we deal with all the missing episodes as they come in and we complete screens at the same time, we're able to do the two together. The return home interview takes into account what we know about a young person's mental health and are they accessing education. So we'll always record what education setting they attend, or if they're not in education. We'll also record whether we know if they're accessing a mental health service. So within the first lockdown, we were doing a lot of signposting for young people to an online service called Kooth, for example, because that was something they could access quite easily. But we were noticing that a lot of young people were going missing because they wanted to spend time with friends. They were finding it really difficult within the home environment as tensions were higher because they were spending a lot of time with their family. Again, as it says, we'll consider what intelligence we've got to share with the police. So the way our team works is we sit within the Child Advice Duty Service. So we sit near the police team that deal with missing and exploitation. So we are constantly able to have conversations with them about what information is returned from a return home interview. Also, we're able to look at whether there's something specific we want to ask a young person, and we can have that dialogue as children and young people are found throughout the day. As it says there, we'll analyse the information and come up with an action plan. So we always analyse what the young person, parents, carers, professionals have told us and what we think this means for that young person. So we'll always look at the impact of that young person, the impact on the young person if they continue to go missing. The action plan will often be very specific to that each individual young person, with specific actions around what they can do in future should they find themselves in that vulnerable situation, or where they or a specific plan. It might even be around what the expectations are from the parents around that young person's curfew. What we were able to do in some of the COVID lockdown periods was be quite clear with some of our care settings around the expectations of how long a young person could go out for example, and to ensure they were still complying with regulations. This is just a little bit about the local picture in Norfolk for missing children. So in 2019, we had more than 2,000 children a year go missing. As I've said there, we're seeing much longer missing episodes and children returning from out of county having been involved in drug supply, so county lines. So I've seen a big increase of that over the past year, really. We've found that the use of having an in-house team of missing practitioners for return home interviews really effective, and it's been vital for future safeguarding. What we've found is that we're able to get that information we want back much easily from the missing practitioners, and action safety much more efficiently. We have use of a dashboard which gives us information about our most regular missing young people and locations where young people are found. So I will get monthly data on the young people I need to be most concerned about that most frequently go missing. Equally, the police to have the same kind of setup, so we can discuss those young people and look at what their action plans look like. So in CADS, as it said, a child is reported missing to Norfolk Police when their whereabouts cannot be established, or the behaviour is out of character, or we're concerned they're at risk of harm. When the police receive a report of a child missing, they add this to their system, Compact, and a report is generated and then shared with CADS. So as soon as they log that child on their system as being missing, the report is automatically shared and emailed to the CADS inbox. So I can see throughout the day who's been reported missing and who's returned home. The police undertake inquiries to locate that missing child. So it's important, as I've said, that any carers, yourselves, have got details of what you know about that young person, who they associate with, where they are known to go, and contact details. So that includes social media for that young person. So we always try and encourage parents and carers to keep that up to date and know who their children's friends are. As I said, I review them on a daily basis. So I get a list in the morning of who's been missing and found in the last 24 hours. However, we're reviewing it constantly as it comes through out the day. Once a child is found, as soon as CADS are notified, we'll look at action in a return home interview. So I'll send that out to a missing practitioner, and we will have a discussion about what we need to explore with that young person. Our missing practitioners have been completing those visits. They've been offering face-to-face, virtual visits, telephone visits, whatever is appropriate given the current guidelines. But a young person has always had the opportunity, where possible, to have a face-to-face visit to discuss their return home interviews. We felt that's really important. As it says there, a child will be subject to a strategy discussion if we know. So really, if there's been a missing episode over 24 hours, if there's been a significant concern for their safety, so if they've disclosed an incident or that they've been hurt or harmed or involved in any crime, then we would look at whether we need to hold a strategy discussion. And also, all young people are subject to a strategy discussion if they've been missing 3 times in 42 days. So what you can expect as a school when a young person is found is that a missing practitioner, who are currently managed by the new Targeted Youth Support Service, they may contact you or the family, and they'll arrange to see the child for an RHI. So you may get familiar with the practitioners. We've got 6 across the county. 2 in the areas are divided into 3, and we've got 2 in each area. However, typically what we see is patterns of certain areas being busier than others. So at the moment, the city and the east are quite busy. Breckland tends to be quite quiet, but we've got missing practitioners available in each area to conduct those RHIs within 72 hours. It says that it may result in additional support being offered to the family. So you might have a young person that's within your education setting that hasn't been missing before, not open to services, and as a result of their missing episode, they are then open to a service because they've gone missing. We may be able to signpost them to other services, but we will always review that. They will have a discussion with CADS with a consultant social worker. So the missing practitioners will call CADS, a consultant social worker will talk through their return home interview, and we'll look at what we can do. As it said there, you might be asked to participate in missing strategy discussions. So for any child that's in your setting, you can expect to be invited to a strategy discussion if they've been missing 3 times in 42 days, it goes over 24 hours, or there's been an event or incident which has occurred. And missing episodes, you can expect that they will regularly be discussed as part of the child's plan. So particularly within meetings that feature around the exploitation risk, there'll be a specific conversation around missing episodes. So I think it's over to Claire now, who's going to talk to you a bit about the education screening form, which is the other part of what is expected for you guys to feed back to us and why this is important, really.
Hi, Katie. Thank you. Thanks. And thank you, everyone, for coming. So Katie's put together this table kind of which gives some explanation about the different boxes on the education screening form. So when our team send out to your education setting a missing notification through any comms, at the moment we will send you a blank education screening form template at the same time to support your completion of that document. We ask that you complete it within 24 hours of receiving the missing notification, because obviously we then share that back with the missing practitioners who will use that information to support that return home interview and any support that needs to come from there. So it's really, really important that it happens on a timely basis, but also that it gives sufficient information to support what you know within education settings. We have absolutely noticed that education settings have been providing screening forms much more regularly and within really good time frames over the recent months. So thank you all for doing that. It's really, really made a positive difference. However, I think it's really helpful to kind of have a look at sort of some types of examples so that we can perhaps be really clear about what kind of information would be helpful, because I know how much information you hold within schools, and I know it's another job to put the information into a form. So if we just kind of have a look at a couple. So the one on it looks to me on the left of the screen, I'm not so good with left and right, but the one that's virtually blank, it's kind of a nil return really. We do see quite a lot of forms like that. And that may be because when you unpick it with the education setting, it might have been because it's a new child to the school, or it's a child that's never attended, or they've been permanently excluded, or the child has been missing so frequently they don't have anything further to say. However, it's absolutely crucial that somewhere on that form you give that context of why you don't have anything further to add. So perhaps you may want to say, this child has been missing 3 times every week for the past 3 months. I submitted a full form on the whatever date you submitted it, and there's no further information from that date to provide, just so that the person who receives that form is able to understand the context of the information that you're providing. In comparison, the missing form on the what looks to me like the right hand side gives much more information. So I often see under attendance just a percentage mark, but it's really important to give that explanation about what's going on behind the attendance. So if it's really good attendance, you might want to give some explanation about that, particularly at the moment where we know that children are accessing education in very different ways and not all children are accessing it in the same way. So if you can provide that context, it's really helpful. We don't want you to duplicate information that you already have in other places. So that first example is about where a fast track to attendance process might be in place to ensure that parents are making sure the children attend school. You don't need to rewrite that plan onto this document. Perhaps you could just submit the fast track plan with the document so we can share that with the missing team. They wouldn't have access to those documents unless you share them. In the same way, kind of with behaviour, exclusions and timetable, missing practitioners may not know what the current situation is in terms of expectations around remote learning, when children are expected to be back in school. So if you can give that context around what timetable is in place, and if there is a reduced timetable, I would highly recommend including your reduced timetable plan that you will have submitted to the attendance team, or you can always put a note on there to say that it's been submitted to the attendance team so we can pull that through, but they should be there together. Again, academic progress is really helpful, but I don't know if Katie has a view on how easy that is for practitioners to understand, if they're not perhaps from an education background.
Yeah, so in terms of the academic progress, yeah, it's important that, as it says there, that we're clear on what that looks like, because if they're not, they do have some understanding, but it's about the impact that that's having. So as it says there, due to the lower attendance, which is really the important information, that she's not making that progress. So that's quite a good example of exactly what we'd want to see. What is the impact of what's going on for this young person on their academic progress? That's what we really want to understand. It might be about what's going on, your interpretation of what you feel is going on for that young person in terms of their peer group network or their home life that is impacting on their academic progress. We won't want to know necessarily specifics in terms of each individual subject, but it's just about whatever's going on for them that might have an impact, and what you're seeing.
Okay, and it's kind of similar with peer group, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
That's really, really important to add into that kind of information for your return home interview, because you may well be aware of peer group and networks and things within the local community that information might not be available or readily available elsewhere, and that's thinking about that contextual safeguarding again as well, isn't it? So the more information you can give, the better. I quite often see, yes, young person X has lots of friends in school and they're well liked, but actually what Katie and her team are looking for is the detail of who are those young people.
Yes.
Where are they kind of perhaps is that a school-based friendship group, or is it wider than that, to really help to sort of map out what might be going on.
Yeah, that's really important in terms, if you think about exploitation and we look at, they might have an association with another young person that we know is involved in, is being exploited. Therefore, that's really important for us to understand that. If we think they haven't got many peers within school and they're associating with older people, that's equally as important. But names are really helpful.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'll just kind of, the last thing I just wanted to mention is when you receive the missing notification from our team with the blank template form, please don't send us back the notification form, the missing notification form. That's for your school, for the child safeguarding records, for you to record on there the further actions that you've undertaken and your usual safeguarding arrangements about that information. We don't need that shared back with us. If you do think that there is further information that you want to provide, that perhaps isn't necessarily fit in a box that's on the form, please just type on the box and on the form and add something else in. Send us back that one form for us to share then with the missing practitioners. And we will be soon moving to just providing you with a link. We're going to house the education information form on our Operation Encompass webpage. So we'll just give you a link rather than keep sending you blank template forms as well. But I think that's probably as much as I wanted to cover. But thank you for those of you who do send them in. Hopefully it's given some context about why it's really helpful and important, and the more information you have, the better. I don't know if Katie's got anything else she wants to add, or whether we just move on to questions.
Yeah, no, I haven't. It's just that if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So in the chat, we've had Katrina asked the question. Katrina Warren's from Short Stay School for Norfolk. Does that mean that schools do not need to report to CADS themselves? I'm not sure at what point in the slides that came from, Katrina. I don't know if you could unmute yourself, and happy to give some explanation.
Yeah.
or Katrina, if you could put it into the chat if you're not able to unmute. And then the
I
second
wonder if
question.
that's around, Claire, I wonder if that's around when a school has got worries about a young person and then the missing episode has happened. I think they're wondering perhaps because they're aware that we'll look at it in terms of safeguarding, whether we need to give additional support. I'm wondering if they were, it was at the point that when they reported to the police. Oh, okay. So if you're aware that they have been reported to the police missing, but you've got additional information to add, then yes, that's important to either share. Well, in the first instance, important to share with the police in terms to help their inquiries. But also, if you're aware of some safeguarding worries immediately from that, I would say yes, call CADS.
I can unmute myself now.
Oh, great.
Sorry. I was frantically trying to find my laptop, squeezes everything down. Yes, no, I was interested to read and hear that at the point where there's a missing notification, the police, I think, report it to CADS. And I was just thinking, right, do we need to do it doubly? Do the school need to report it as well? Is that good practice, or actually, no, that's not necessary?
What I see, I suppose for me, what I don't know is, say you are you're concerned a young person's gone missing, parent has you've said to the parent you need to report them missing. You won't necessarily always know that the parent's done that. So what I would say is you could, by calling us, we have a specific option on the CADS line for exploitation and missing, because we're sitting with those police officers. We can automatically get them to check their system to see if that child has got a reported missing, because if there's any delay in us receiving that form, we can check that that's been done, or we can then follow that up as an action. So I'd say there's no harm in you doing that in calling us as well, because I guess you're not always going to be sure that the police have necessarily logged that as a missing episode. They might have logged it as an absence, but you might still have those worries about who they're associating with, and there may be some delay in us getting that information. So I'd say, yeah, I would encourage you to.
Thank you. Lovely.
And Katie, I guess kind of leading on from that one, we've got a question. I will go back to the other ones about confusion about reporting to police.
We've had lots of confusion about who needs to report to the police. We've been told by the Safe Schools police, so that is a responsibility that even if they've gone missing from school, 101 will often not accept calls to school. This causes conflict with families and social worker quite often. Is this correct? It's a really tricky one, because it should be the parent carer, because they've got the legal responsibility for that young person. But if you're ever concerned that you feel they're not going to follow that up, I'd want to be understanding why they wouldn't. And as I said to you before, there could be something around, a concern about COVID fines. So recently, I had a worry about a young person where there was a fine issued to the parent, and I was then concerned, would they then be reported missing continually? So I suppose it follows on, and I'm reading there that 101 will often not accept calls from school. I would call us if you've got any worries that if you've given instruction to parent carer that a young person is missing and you are concerned that they've not done that, I would say you could call us and we would check that with the police on their compact system. We've got access to for them to be able to do that, and then we could check that that's been done. If it's not been done, we could then, I guess, discuss advising you around where to go next. It says they're causing conflict with families and social worker. I just wondered what you kind of meant by that, if you're available to unmute.
Yeah, we just end up in an argument with we've had a few families.
You've got an example?
Yeah, I mean, so a child has gone missing quite regularly. For example, the police are understandably getting really fed up with her.
Yeah.
And basically, we will ring carer. We looked after child, so we'll ring carer and say she's done a bunk again. Please, could you let 101 know? And then their social worker is saying, no, school need to do it. And, she's gone missing from school. She's in the care of school. It's not your responsibility. So, we'll try and ring 101, and 101 will say, no, it is parental responsibility, as you've said. you know. And you just end up getting into a situation where you don't really want to be arguing with who should be ringing 101, because you know,
someone needs to, when
the child is potentially at risk. So
yeah,
I mean, a lot of the time we know she's not at risk either, but you'd never take that for granted. So
what would be the barrier for the carer not report? That's because the social workers said not
I
to.
think so. I think they just think we should be doing our job, in all honesty. So, and I think they're obviously quite stressed because this young person has gone missing so many times as well. So I have had to send them an email from a Safer Schools officer saying, look, you know, we're happy to do this and we're not shirking our responsibilities, but often we're actually being told, no, we need you to ring, you know. So I have sent them excerpts of the email saying it is parent carer responsibility. I understand why, because if the child is with them, a lot of the questions are, what were they wearing, what do they look like? But then carers and parents should know what they've gone out the room, you know, in the house in, probably. So
of course. And I mean, often what they'd want to do is you know, if they've left your setting, potentially they could have gone home without you necessarily knowing. We've had situations like that, so we'd want that's why it'd be important for parents to say, have they had, and they may have had contact with that young person even though they've left. So
it's just not something you want to be arguing with somebody about, and you know, we just want to make sure the young person is safe at the end of the day, but it just comes up so many.
And my advice would be,
I was just going to say, Katie, that I think if Dawn, I don't know if you are using it, but the police the Norfolk Constabulary Police checklist, because it really lays out clearly that it's parent carer's responsibility.
We've sent that out. Thank you.
What I would say as well is within that child's planning meeting, if you know there's frequent missing episodes, I think it's about ensuring there's a discussion about that and make sure there's a really clear plan around reporting, at what point to report, who's going to take ownership for that. This is what we're going to do as a school. And when the return home interview is undertaken, have that conversation with that missing practitioner around, actually, I think this is school's views on what the action plan should look like.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. Okay. And I think the next one, kind of, you know, going back, was about whether return home interviews are shared with parents.
Again, it's a child's document. If the child, so it's up to the child, so it's very much led by the child. Obviously that's age dependent, but we have, because parents are included within the return home interview process, often the information can be shared, yes. But again, a child can request to see their return home interview in its entirety as well. But any information, the planning, they should be very much included of, so there's nothing in there should be a surprise. It may be that a child, you know, we have to consider ages of children and what they're happy for them to know about, but generally the information is shared as part of that discussion.
Okay. And then Angela's iPhone has asked about, sometimes the notifications are concurrent, so feedback will remain the same. Do you duplicate the form regardless? I think that's about the education screening form, because sometimes they'll get the missing notification one day, and then the following day they'll get the missing and found. So where that's happening quite a lot, I do go back to schools and say, you know, you might not need to keep sending it back in. Yeah, that's right. So it's the same question then Amanda that we talked about from Angela. So no, if you've submitted a really good contextual kind of explanation of where that child's situation is, what you know about them from an education perspective, in recently, don't resubmit anything else. You can always just drop us a line to the Operation Encompass mailbox to say we've received it, we don't have anything further to add. However, if you do have something further to add, you can update that form and put something new on it, because you may well, the missing episode and then becoming found may well then have added in a bit more, you know, maybe you're going to be offering a school place in a way that you weren't before, or there could be more information. So it's about, no, we don't want you to duplicate unnecessarily, but it's about that information sharing about how things are and what's changing, what the new picture is looking like. Is that helpful?
Yeah. We've got another question there, haven't we, about return home interview practitioners contacting school to arrange to meet with a young person with issues with people turning up asking. Okay.
When you say young people turning up to see young people, I think it's Natasha Drury. What people? Are you talking about social workers, or is it a missing
or is it the
practitioner?
RHI practitioner? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's both. We've had social workers that randomly turn up and answer phone calls saying they're here to see somebody, and we've got no prior knowledge of it. And we've had previously when early help practitioner, early help workers.
Okay. So they no longer, in the main, you're probably not going to see many visits being undertaken by social workers or family support practitioners. They're going to be missing practitioners, and they should always make contact with you to arrange to meet with that young person. They'll always discuss with the parents, carers about where might be best, or they'll ask the young person where they'd like it conducted. Obviously, we've had to adapt that with COVID restrictions, and sometimes certain education settings it's not always been possible, so we'll do our best to see a young person where we can, but in a face-to-face way. But you should always expect a call.
Natasha, just to check, is that about in context of return home interviews in school, or is that about perhaps social workers coming to see children in school unannounced as well?
No, it's mostly for return home interviews.
Yeah.
All right, so hopefully that's
it is obviously a tight time scale of 72 hours, so but they will, I think the preference is often to see them within their education setting, so they can get that completely, because if there is something going on with the home for them, we can see them completely away from that setting, but we'll also make visits to that setting to understand what's going on. But you will
turn up unannounced, then sometimes we've had it where the young person's not actually in school on that day.
Is that recently?
No, not really. Not during lockdown. No.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because the team have been, the team they've only just established as a team of 6 recently. So hopefully, I'd like to say that hasn't happened.
And this new targeted youth support team.
Recent, but yeah. Oh, what was that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask about the new targeted youth support. That's the first I've heard of a new team, so I just wondered whether we could have a bit more information about that.
Yeah, so there's, as I said to you, there's 6 missing practitioners within that. They're a county-wide team, and they're comprised of so each area. So we've got City and South, we've got Breckland and West, Northern Border and East. Each area's got a team manager, a senior youth worker, case youth workers, and detached youth workers, and missing practitioners. So sometimes what will happen is missing practitioners will identify that this young person could benefit from some targeted work from a youth worker. So a youth case worker will pick up some work with that young person on a one-to-one basis. So the idea of those youth case workers will be, they'll primarily work with our children that are screened at risk of exploitation, and that's at any level. So at the point we identify that they're at risk of being exploited, we will try and put in some targeted work. The detached youth workers, they are trying to engage with young people out on the streets. So young people that they see in parks, particular settings that they need to work on. So obviously this will change when the restrictions ease, but somewhere like the shopping centre, for example, where we know young people sort of congregate, they're going to try and engage with them, and there'll be lots of scope for positive activities.
I was just going to ask Lucy, I think you'll still be there, but I know that Dan, did he do a webinar around Pathfinder, and did it cover off around targeted youth support service?
Yeah, he did do a Pathfinder webinar. That was back in October, so quite a while ago now. But no, it wasn't, from memory, I'd have to look at the slides. I don't think it went into a massive amount of detail, because it's a new service, isn't it? It's just really gone live.
The beginning of the month.
Yeah.
really new. So if people attending today, if you complete your feedback form and you think that it would be helpful to have a DSL webinar with someone from the Targeted Youth Support Service, then please let us know if you're interested.
Yeah, I think that probably would be quite useful. The missing team, just to say, have been established for about over a year now. So it's just that they've moved from the Child Advice and Duty Service to the Targeted Youth Support Service to really be that link, so that these young people have got some kind of follow-up support.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much today, Katie.
My pleasure.
If people have got any other questions or places to go for information, where's the best place for them to go to?
In relation to any queries about CADS or missing?
Yeah,
so anything specific around anything more general around missing, if you want to drop a question, then obviously we've got the CADS line. There's a missing and exploitation option on the CADS, the 8021 number, so just give that a call and one of the consultant social workers can talk you through any advice you need around that.
Lovely. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. We have got other webinars that we will be promoting coming out to you via Anycoms Plus from Claire over the coming weeks. But it is just after 12 o'clock. So thank you very much for your time. Have a good afternoon and weekend when it arrives. Look after yourselves. Stay safe. Bye-bye.